Good Saturday to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Tropical Outlook for the 6th of July. Before we continue with the video, like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. We have moved on to the weekend schedule here at Vogan Weather on YouTube. Looking at the tropics today, and tomorrow we'll be looking at all things global with the 99th edition of the Global Weather Report live stream. That will be looked at, record cold in Tasmania, record-breaking heat across the western United States, the latest on Beryl. As well as that, we may be looking at a sudden stratospheric warming over the Antarctic. What implications may that have on southern portions of Australasia, South Africa, and South America as well? We're going to be looking at that, as well as the ongoing disappointing summer here in the UK, Ireland, and western portions of Europe as well. So if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate your support, but striving to provide a unique, unbiased, unhyped content here on the channel. But it's all about Beryl, and the system is now, at the time of recording, this has been recorded actually the early hours of Saturday morning. It's obviously not being released until early afternoon. But you can see here that the system has now crossed the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. It looked as if it kind of very briefly re-strengthened from Cat 2 to Cat 3, and then it kind of made a landfall just to the south of Cozumel in the Tulum area of Quintana Roo state on the eastern side of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico as a Category 2 hurricane. Now, some of the footage that I've seen, it doesn't look as if it's much more than an upper end tropical storm, if I'm being completely honest with you. Yes, some damage locally, flexing of the palms, heavy rain blowing in off the ocean, but generally speaking, it looks as if we've had relatively, and I have to use that term very, very loosely, relatively weak impacts on the Yucatan Peninsula. So we'll wait and see what happens over the next 24, 36 hours or so as the center of the circulation moves away from land and returns to a region in which it could regain strength once again, regain organization, and consequently regain strength. So the National Hurricane Center latest information is that it is literally just now pulling away from the land mass of the Yucatan Peninsula as a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, central pressure at 996, and moving at a slower pace now at 13 miles per hour in that still west to northwesterly track. Next in line is likely to be Texas, but also we cannot still rule out implications on far northern Mexico as this system continues to track its way west-northwestwards. Now, it did move across the Yucatan slightly further north than initially thought. That could have an effect on actually seeing not only a further north track as it continues to move towards the far northern Mexico and the United States, but also it may have a little bit longer over water to allow a regaining of organization and strength. Now you can see here that we have got very little in the way of organization at all. It looks actually almost like just a kind of typical thunderstorm area. Not really organized. There's not a great deal of spin to that circulation. You can see the spin, but there's no inner core. It's completely void of it. In fact, the center of the circulation itself is actually pretty much on the coastline of the Yucatan here. So you can see that the area of convection is now peeled away, and essentially it's an exposed center of low pressure here, which means that it is in a very, very weakened state as it crossed over the land area of the Yucatan. So you can see here that this is the latest track projected by the National Hurricane Center over the next couple of days here, and the NHC does expect it to go back towards hurricane status, but you notice the track continues to shift further north, and that is one of the reasons for that is because it actually crossed over the Yucatan and spent a little bit less time over land. Now, given how ragged it looks, that doesn't necessarily mean an awful lot, because the problem that we have is that while it's been in training dry air, a lot of its convection on the northern side of the system. We've got dry air getting driven in. That is part of the reason, and actually why the center is exposed and all the convection is generally to the north side of the circulation, is because of dry air getting driven in on the western side of the system. But what will happen is we've got an area of low pressure. It was actually a tut or an upper tropospheric trough that was present to the north of the system. That was generating south to northwest kind of variance, but there was northwest and southwesterly shear that was helping the weakening process from Cat 4, Cat 3 down to Cat 2. And the shear and the dry air has been working hand in hand to allow the system to weaken from Cat 2 to Cat 4 prior to a landfall on the Mexican coast. Then a third whammy, so we've got obviously dry air, wind shear, but then the third process of weakening has been the crossing of the Yucatan. As it then exits the Yucatan further north, it's likely to be tracking further north, but also is going to spend more time over 29 Celsius waters and deep waters, warm waters at that. The problem is that we're going to start to see the wind shear relax and the dry air become less of an influence. And the modelling is indicating that we start to see the moisture on the northern side of the system kind of wrap back around the center once again, and we start to see the regeneration of a core, and that is the concern. So that further north track over the Yucatan means it will spend more time over water before reaching the next and final landfall, which is likely to be Texas, as can be seen here in the latest NHC forecast. Here it actually goes between Corpus Christi and Galveston here. So this is a very significant northward turn in terms of the track. Now remember, just about 36 hours ago, the track was taking it into the Rio Grande, which is the border between Texas and Mexico. It is now shifted about 250 miles to the north of that original landfall point. So these are significant changes that are taking place and rather interesting ones. If we look at the global models here, this is quite a strong consensus seen by the overall model output, indicating that that track is now shifting further north here. Very strong consensus in terms of the crossing of the western Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, near landfall point, which is later tomorrow and probably into the early hours of Monday morning, you see a little bit of a spread here showing up. So there's strong consensus, good agreement in the models that it takes that track into this general region there here, and then there's a spread out as we get closer to the landfall point. Now I want to show you something here which is quite interesting. We'll look at the GFS. In fact, let's have a quick look at we'll look at the GFS first. Sorry, I do apologize. So here is once Hurricane Beryl. You can see here that we've got a strengthening area of high pressure over the southeastern United States. That has been allowing, along with strong easterly trade winds, embedded the system. We've been seeing that kind of general west and northwesterly track for its entire life cycle, if I'm being honest. But the strength of this area of high pressure here has been helping it continue to push westwards. And what has happened as it moved on the southern flank of Jamaica, we started to see an upper level trough here developing just in the south of this 594 decameter ridge of high pressure over the southeast. That then was the initial stages of the weakening process, because this upper level trough then seen southwesterly winds become stronger, generally at 30 to 40 knots, blowing out of the southwest, at times the northwest. That, along with dry air becoming trained and entangled within the western and southwestern side of the system, off Hispaniola, off Cuba, that working along with the wind shear has allowed the system to retrograde quite significantly. Then, of course, it moved in over the northern Yucatan Peninsula here, but you're noticing here something quite significant. One piece of that upper trough is now sitting well out over the western Atlantic basin. The other piece is actually on the Mexican coast here. But what is happening is you notice the big changes taking place over the United States. Instead of having that 594 millibar or decameter ridge of high pressure, it has significantly weakened thanks to a deepening trough that is driving south over the plain states. What is going to happen essentially here is we've had that split in the upper tropospheric trough, one piece over here, the other piece over Mexico. Down comes the trough, and what is going to happen is with a relaxed westerly Gulf of Mexico environment over warm waters, we are likely to see the regeneration of Beryl, and it will start to feel the effects of this dipping south trough, and therefore this trough digging south along with the jet stream is going to start to pull the system towards the Texas coast here. And you can see here as we play through this loop, in comes Beryl. It looks as if it's got very, very little to talk about by the time we reach what this is actually 18Z today, Saturday the 6th of July. And then you notice here that as we approach the landfall point, which is during the course of tomorrow, a couple of little closed contours are starting to pop from the center. Those closed increase in those closed contours show that the system in the upper levels of the atmosphere is becoming stronger once again, and then it will start to feel the pull of the jet and the trough over the central plain states, and that the system is expected to move in somewhere between Brownsville and the western side of Galveston Island, likely later in the day, Sunday into the early hours of Monday. So you can see here quite a closed a contour field here associated with the upper levels of Beryl as it moves into the Texas coast sometime early Monday morning. So it's quite interesting to see here what is taking place. So if we move forward, let's have a look and see what the relative humidity is looking like here with the system. And if we go back to the time around its interaction with Jamaica, you can see here, let's have a look actually at a closer up view because it would be a little bit easier to see. So just bear with me a little second here, folks, and we'll have a look at what we are talking about. So you can see here, this is obviously, like I say, the browns represent dry air, the greens represent humid, moist air. And as you can see here, as we play through the sequence here, we've got some fairly dry air over the Gulf of Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula. Watch what happens as the system makes that approach. We've got strong southwesterly winds. It's weakening significantly. Its greatest level of weakening came to the south of the Caymans to the point it made landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula. Drier entrainment, southwesterly winds was increasing the weakening process. Then it weakened further as it crossed over the Yucatan Peninsula. But you notice the dry air starting to pull and push that moisture north and east from the center of circulation, exposing the center. No eye anywhere to be seen now at this stage. But what is going to happen is as it crosses over this 29C water, it's feeling the depth of that 29 Celsius water, and as the wind shear relaxes, the dry air starts to get pushed away from the center of the circulation, and the model is seeing the pressure fall. We're seeing the closed contours pop from the center, And you notice here that the system is able to repel that dry air entrainment and is starting to see the wrapping around of the moist air. So the humid air, the moist, rich air is now starting to wrap around a redeveloping core, and the model is seeing that the system eventually fights that dry air off. It's in a fairly relaxed atmospheric environment. We've not got this lopsided where the structure is kind of tilted to the right hand side here, all the convection blown off to the east, a complete lack of convection in the southwestern side of the system. We're seeing it realign as the winds relax through the atmosphere. Then we start to see the regeneration of the centre, and then as we move towards the early Monday time frame here, now bearing in mind the GFS is indicating that the pressure at the time of landfall is around 982 millibars. But if we look at a couple of hurricane models here, it's quite interesting to see where it's showing. This is the H wharf, and Beryl is expected to re-strengthen quite significantly. So it rises upwards of 1,000 millibars, then it starts to fall once again, and as it crosses the western Gulf, the H wharf is indicating that the pressure continues to fall. Look at the moisture, look at the convective bands circling the entire system with no dry air entrainment, no wind shear to kind of have the system lopsided. It's looking fairly organized once again, and there is the Rio Grande Valley, Mexico to the south, Texas to the north. And then as we continue to play through this, the pressure is dropping through the 970s and millibars, and expected, seen by the wharf model anyway, to drop into the 960s and millibars with nice banding, a closed band of deep convection here, representative of what could be a upper end category 2 hurricane. But we'll watch this space and see what takes place over the next 24 hours or so. But that's the H wharf idea according to the model here, and it'll be something to keep in mind and watch as we go forward. Another thing that I want to suggest to you is this. These are the current sea surface temperatures over the Gulf of Mexico. So it's moving away from 27 Celsius water, so slightly less in the way of heat content, but then it's moving into an area of 29 Celsius. So it's obviously been encountering 29 Celsius waters throughout its lifespan, from just to the east of the leewards all the way to the Yucatan coast here. It re-enters even possibly warmer waters as it moves into the shelf waters here. Shallow water, deep 30 Celsius water temperatures here, and with a very, very conducive environment coupled with even slightly warmer sea surface temperatures, there is a small possibility, folks, that this thing could become a major hurricane before it makes landfall in Texas. I'm not trying to hype things up or say things that is irresponsible or scaremongering or whatever, but I think the environment could, if it has enough time over the western Gulf with reduced shear, lack of dry air, and these warm water temperatures. And obviously, as these systems approach the Texas coast, you've got the depth of the ocean surface itself becomes reduced, and as you see, the 30 Celsius waters almost extend right down to the seabed. So there is this kind of unlimited fuel source from the sea that they could favour a relatively rapid intensification during the final 6 to 12 hours before landfall here. So that's something that needs to get taken into consideration moving forward here. So we'll continue to watch this. We'll touch on this in the live stream tomorrow at 4 p.m. So I hope you can join me for that, and I'll try and provide more analysis on this. But lots of reasons to stick around here on the channel. European Outlook, obviously, we'll be back again on Monday. We'll talk about all things UK, Ireland, and Europe. But it's a big weekend coming up here. I'm excited to bring the global weather report tomorrow. We're going to be looking at all different aspects and different extremes that are taking place, both in terms of rainfall, drought, heat, and even cold to speak about, believe it or not, as well. So join me at 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and see you tomorrow with more. Bye for now.